Hello, and welcome to an overview of the Assure model. I have been investigating this model over the last couple weeks, and I've decided that it is in fact this model that is best for my instructional purposes, and I'm going to share with you why. Before we get to that, however, I'd like to explore the major aspects of the Assure model, starting with the first one of analyze learners. In this step, students are evaluated not only based on their demographics, but also their prior knowledge, their general characteristics, and basically where they are at currently as a learner. This can take place through a variety of methods, whether it be through surveys, pre-tests, past data that's been collected by prior educators. And so you really have to get a picture of who your learners are before they're coming to your classroom. The second step is to state the major objectives. Now, largely, there are already state objectives that are in place. However, as the instructor, I would develop additional learning outcomes and learning targets of where I want my students to make substantial gains. And much of that will also be evaluated through the development of course rubrics that focus on particular skills, concepts, accuracy, or the conditions of performance. So much of this goes into the preparation for instruction. The third step, and this is probably the most vital, I think, for my classroom, would be to select the methods, media, and materials. Basically, how am I going to approach the classroom, and what materials in terms of technological resources and print resources am I going to marry in order to best instruct my students both in and outside of the classroom, because as we all know, education should not stop once students leave school, that it should continue on outside of the classroom. And so part of the Assure model is figuring out how you're going to draw your learners in both in and out of the classroom. The fourth step is going to be to utilize your media materials, making sure that, number one, they're appropriate for the classroom. And in a class where I talk about lots of controversial topics, it is extremely important for me to preview those materials to ensure that my students are getting, first of all, unbiased information, or if it is biased, make sure that I have materials that present the other side. Make sure that those material works. A lot of times district firewalls can be a problem if you're trying to access resources and students may not be able to get to them because of, particular security flags, and you can request for those to be lifted prior to your actual lesson, and then of course using those sources in order to provide the instruction. Okay. Step 5, I also think this is another vital piece of the Assure model, and partly why the reason I chose it is the emphasis on the required learner participation. In my classes, I like to use a variety of discussion, both in the classroom and then online as well, so that not only are they engaging verbally, but then also using written sources as well. This is also can be used as a form of formative assessment to sort of gauge where students are, and a constant check-in to see, to ensure that they're getting the lesson as you go. And step 6 is really sort of twofold. Not only is it supposed to be an evaluation of how did your students do, but that should also be a direct reflection on how you did. How was your instructional delivery? Did your media materials work the way that you wanted them to do? And of course, that is an essential piece of teaching and learning, is that you're constantly evaluating, improving, going back. And then, when you go to the next time, you have a better idea of how that lesson is going to turn out. For an experienced teacher, you'll often notice that the first time you teach a lesson, if you're teaching it multiple times throughout the day, it's not until about that second or third time that you really sort of hit your stride with that lesson and you feel comfortable. And so this evaluation and revision piece is really, really important to look at, to ensure that you're improving every time that you teach it. So how does this model support instruction in my classroom? And this is something that I've already addressed slightly when we talked about the different steps, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about my particular situation and how the Assure model really fits not only the materials provided by my district, but the way the curriculum is written, and then also my own teaching style. And I think this is really going to enhance what I'm already doing. So first of all, my district is a Google district. We have Gmail, we have Google Drive with unlimited space, we have Google Classroom, as well as the Google Apps suite for education. So Google Forms, Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Drawing, it's Google everything. So there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and the use of these technological tools, not to mention next year, the district is also going one-to-one. So the Assure model's emphasis on technology is something that fits right in with what we're doing here in Rockwood and how I'm going to incorporate this into my blended style of teaching. The other piece that I am looking at for my capstone project, and then also looking to enhance for this course, is of course my website. And I wanted to use my website as a supplemental way to provide students with the ability to access information both outside the classroom. Yes, they're going to have access to Google Classroom, but this is also can be a site for parents to go and get that information that they need, especially for my world history sophomores who need a little bit additional support versus my politics and conflict class. I envisioned this as being like an area of resources for them to go for particular units, not only to study in preparation for assessments, but then also required to go here to view videos or other links to other interactive tools that I want them to be looking at in preparation for lessons that we're doing inside of the classroom, and then to gain additional perspective. Not to mention the myriad of other Web 2.0 tools that can be used that the Assure model definitely promotes with your selection of resources. And these tools can be used in a variety of ways. So, of course, you know, with the Google Apps Suite, it's a variety of things that I can pull from, but there's also a lot of other resources I would like to pull in to my politics and conflict class. I'm going to show you some of those in just a moment. Okay. So how will the Assure model improve instruction? One of the things through exploring the Assure model that I've kind of sat up and take notice to is the idea that we need to be very careful about the selection of media and sources. One of the sources that my district already provides is the Choices program. And this is developed through the Watson Institute at Brown University. Excuse me. And basically, this curriculum is designed essentially to give student choice. Through its title, you can certainly glean that. However, what this program does is it provides not only some of the background information on major foreign policy issues, but it also provides some online sources, including videos, surveys, online discussion topics, things that will help promote what I'm already doing in my classroom. It also gives students the opportunity to participate in simulations where they're going to have to propose things to the Senate on Foreign Relations Committee. They would present, you know, how they want to approach a particular problem. And then that, of course, would lead to lots of class discussion. And then that final piece would be with the required learner participation, not only participation in the simulation, but then also the reflection piece. After they hear all the different perspectives, what is going to be their personal solution to this based on the evidence that they learned from the lesson. And of course, this program itself promotes learner participation and is something in particular that I'm looking at for my class to integrate more than I already do. And that is because of the use of the Assure model and how this fits in with that. It also has the assessment piece with rubrics and different writing prompts as well. So this is a good choice, I think, going forward for my class. There are also other simulation cases that I've been investigating as well to consider for those materials, such as the model diplomacy. It comes from the Council of Foreign Relations. Here was a case study that they're promoting currently on their website on Boko Haram, which is, of course, one of the terrorist organizations that we talk about in the class. And basically what this does is it puts them on the National Security Council, and they basically look at this case study and the different tools of diplomacy, and then through this simulation determine what are the best tools to approach this current situation. So there are lots of materials out there for myself to explore and then to determine which is going to be the best for my classroom, which is, I think, one of the driving forces behind the Assure model. Other sources that I can find are like the Global Conflict Tracker. This is something that I've directed my students to before. Basically, if you look at these different dots, it basically talks about the level of threat to U.S. interests. If you click on each of the dots, it brings up more information, current news stories, photographs of what's going on in the region. So you'll notice that, like, we have the South China Sea, we have North Korea, what's going on there, gang violence in Mexico. So those sorts of things are certainly prevalent to my students, and this is a great informational resource that I'd want to make available to them through my lessons, especially, talking about nuclear programs and North Korea. Okay. This is a tool that I found to evaluate some of these media sources, because sometimes it's hard to know, is this going to help with my classroom? And basically, it's just a guideline to evaluate sources that you come across on the internet, and might be a way to sort of pare down, because sometimes the amount of sources out there can be certainly overwhelming, or how that's going to look in your classroom. So I thought this might be a helpful resource to take a look at to ensure that the sources that you are in fact picking are credible, they are relevant, and they can be used in your classroom in an effective way.